Now March is a really exciting time for the vegetable grower, and we can see spring just over the horizon, so that we know in a very short period of time we'll start to plant our seeds in earnest, and there's plenty of work to do with planting and growing. And March is a fantastic time where we can lay the foundations for a really productive growing season by doing some housekeeping and other jobs over the next few weeks. And in this video I'll be showing you some of the things I'll be doing in my garden vegetable plot in preparation for the growing season. Now you can see today I've got my hat on. It's right at the beginning of March and it's still cold. In fact, we're predicted to have frosts here over the next week or two. So it's a little bit early to do a lot of things in terms of planting and growing, but there are many different things that you can do in your allotment or your garden to prepare for the vegetable growing season. That's exactly what I'm going to show you today. Now March is an excellent time for maintenance and cutting back of any bushes, trees, shrubs that are overgrown. Now behind me I have one of my new vegetable growing areas that I'll be transforming to grow vegetables for this growing season. But you can see it's completely surrounded by hedges and bushes. So what I'll be doing is trimming back these hedges and bushes to make sure that the area is tidy as possible. But also by doing this, it means that I will maximise the amount of light that will get into this area. If I was to leave these and let these grow for another month or two, when we really do get into spring, all of these bare branches here will start to produce leaves, and suddenly the job is much bigger. So March is an excellent time for looking around your garden, your vegetable plot, your boundaries, and seeing if there's any cutting back or trimming or pruning that you need to do. Another fantastic job to do in March is to prepare your vegetable beds ready for the growing season. And in fact, I've got 2 bulk bags of homemade compost that I made in my allotment and brought over a few weeks ago. Now, I'm going to be using these when I prepare my beds for the first time. So in some areas of my vegetable plot, I'm going to be doing some no-dig raised beds. In other areas, I'm going to do a traditional dig method and compare the two and see which is best. Now clearly for the no-dig method, I'm going to need this compost in order to prepare the beds ready for growing. But even in the areas I'm going to do a traditional digging method, I'm going to use some of this compost as a mulch on top. That will do a number of different things, provides a great number of nutrients into the ground. This homemade compost contains all sorts of fantastic nutrients, particularly things like nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. But also by putting the mulch on top, it also will allow moisture to be retained in the ground when you're watering your vegetables. You don't have to use compost for mulching. There's lots of other things that you can use for mulching, things like leaves, even grass clippings, and even manure. But if you are going to use manure, make sure it's well rotted manure. It should be at least 6 to 12 months old before you start to use it on your vegetable beds. So preparing your vegetable beds is a fantastic thing to do in March, and that doesn't matter what size plot you've got, large or small. And even if you haven't got a growing space at all, maybe you grow completely in pots, you can start to think about preparing your pots ready for the growing season. Now another job you can start doing in March is preparing your beds ready for the growing season. That includes things like tidying up and weeding. This bed here is one of my new growing beds, and as you can see I've got the remains of some old plants and weeds from the previous growing season. In fact, this bed was a flower bed, and what you're seeing there is the remains of petunias. So what I should do is clear this area over here and this area over here. In fact, these 2 conifers are going to be removed because I want to make the most of this particular space over here. So don't be overly concerned if your allotment or vegetable plot or garden looks completely weedy at this time of year. That's the reality of what actually happens, and it's just a case of tidying it up. As you can see here, what appears to be quite a lot of weeds will actually take me a very short period of time, because they're only surface weeds, to take up and prepare for the ground. And I've mentioned in previous videos, don't compare your allotment or vegetable plots to other allotments or vegetable plots that may appear really, really tidy. When people film those types of videos, they've clearly done a lot of hard work before they film those videos. The reality is everybody gets weeds and we all have to deal with them. So really it's just a case of getting on top of them, and March is a fantastic time to start that process, because when we get to April and May, when spring really kicks off, the weeds will start to grow really, really fast. Now we're going to see in a minute that March, particularly towards the end of the month, is a good time to start planting your first early potatoes. More on that in a few minutes time. But also vegetable growers tend to like chitting potatoes. Now chitting potatoes is where you'd store the potatoes in a nice dry area with a reasonable amount of light, and it allows them to grow these shoots. That's what the chits are. Now the advantage of doing that is when you plant them in the ground, they've already started growing effectively by having these chits or shoots growing. The reality, however, is you don't actually have to chip your potatoes. I see a lot of discussion about this on various forums and other videos, and some particularly newer growers think that it's absolutely essential, but the reality is you don't need to chip them at all. If you were to go and buy a bag of seed potatoes like I have here from a store and plant them straight in the ground, they will grow perfectly well. So really this job is a matter of choice, and if you want to, you can chip your second earlies and your main crop potatoes at the beginning of March onwards, but don't panic if you don't, because it's not absolutely necessary. Now, if you want to, you can also start to plant your first early potatoes in March. Now, this does depend on where you are in the world and what your weather conditions are. In the UK, we tend to use our last predicted frost date as an indicator of when the best time to sow potatoes here. I'm based right in the centre of the UK, quite near to Birmingham Airport, and our last predicted frost date is the end of April. So if I wanted to sow potatoes directly outside, I'm not going to sow them until maybe a week or two towards the end of April, because the risk of frost is too great. However, there is an alternative to that. If you want to start your potatoes a little bit earlier, you can plant them in these type of 30-litre pots. And the reason that pots are a good idea is because if you have the space or the facilities, then if there is a predicted frost, you can take your potatoes indoors temporarily until the frost has passed. So this year, for the first time, I am going to be growing my potatoes in 30-litre pots. I bought 12 of these, and I'm actually going to plant a few at the end of March, when, even though there is still a potential for frost in this part of the world, I have got the ability to take them indoors. And my other potatoes, my main crop potatoes, I'm still going to plant at the end of April. So depending upon where you are in the world, March could be a time to start your potatoes early, as long as you understand and are very vigilant about frost. Now, as vegetable growers, we're always keen to start sowing, but the difficulty with March, it sort of teases us into thinking it's okay to start sowing because we know spring is just around the corner. But all I would say is, if you are going to sow seeds in March, depending upon where you are in the world, be very cautious for a number of different reasons. So firstly, you may plant seeds and they may germinate and grow, but if the weather conditions in your area of the world are not suitable for you to plant them out, you could end up with an awful lot of plants that are growing, but you've got nowhere to put them, and eventually they're probably going to die. But it is still possible to plant some vegetable seeds in March. Now, I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time talking about what seeds you can sow in March, because there's already a video on my channel which does that. And I'll put a link to that in the comments below, so check that out in your own time. And in that video, you'll see one or two examples of vegetables that you can sow directly outside in March, things as broad beans and peas, etc. And I give examples of my favourite varieties, so that video is really worth a look. But indoors you can start quite a lot of different vegetables. I've already started my tomatoes and peppers, and you'll see a recent video that I did showing you exactly how I did that. But in order for me to decide what I'm going to sow in March, I'll always refer to my sowing and planting calendar, which I produced for myself. I did this in Microsoft Excel. Let me bring that a little bit closer to the camera so you can have a look at it. There you can see down here all the different vegetables and their varieties, and you can see my planner shows me when I can sow indoors, outdoors, plant out, and when to harvest, etc. That's for 2023. And if you haven't got a copy and you would like a free copy of this, then I'll put my email address in the comments below. All you need to do is send me an email, just request a veg calendar, and I'll happily send you one. And I've also recently produced a flower sowing and planting calendar for popular flower seeds that works in exactly the same way as the vegetable calendar, but for flowers. So if you do want a copy of that as well, just request flower calendar and I'll send you that as well. But remember, it is different for all of us depending upon our own growing conditions and our climate. Just bear that in mind when deciding what vegetables that you want to sow. But if you are based in the UK, do check out my video, which I've linked below, which will show you 20 vegetables that you could think about sowing in March. And of course, there are one or two other things that I'll be doing in March to help get ready for my growing season. I'll be tidying my potting shed, particularly this year, because I brought a lot of things from my previous allotments. That needs a good tidy up, and I'll be making space in there. I'll be cleaning my tools and getting them ready, and sharpening my tools as well. So things like my shears, my secateurs, my hedge trimmers, I'll be sharpening them and getting them ready as well, and having a really good general tidy up. So as you can see, March is quite an important month in preparing for the new growing season, and I hope I'll give you one or two ideas. If you're doing things in March that I haven't mentioned in the video, then drop a comment below and let me know what you're doing. It's always good to share these ideas with other growers. So I hope the video has given you 1 or 2 ideas about things that you might think about doing yourselves in preparation for the new growing season in your vegetable garden. And I really hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you do want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit and veg and flowers, and 1 or 2 recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button. And I'll see you all on the next video.